Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time to a world where every breath you take could be your last. Welcome to medieval times. Imagine waking up covered in grime, surrounded by the stench of rotting garbage and the constant buzz of crowded streets filled with shouting merchants, beggars, and guards who might just arrest you for the wrong look. You probably won't survive a single day here. No fancy modern hospitals, no fast food, just brutal realities like dirty water, cruel punishments, and insects crawling where you least want them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to see where you're tuning in from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world of mud, misery, and mysterious smells because you've just woken up in medieval Europe. Not as a knight or a princess, no, that'd be too easy. You're not even a baker. You're just you, dropped right into the middle of the Middle Ages, lying on something that might generously be called a bed, although it mostly resembles a pile of straw that recently lost a fight with a goat. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It's a rich blend of old sweat, damp hay, mildew, and something musky that might be a dead rat or breakfast. There's no window, just a crooked hole in the wooden wall letting in the faintest gray light and a breeze that smells like smoke and cow pies. You sit up too fast and bump your head on a beam. Splinters rain down. Welcome to the 14th century. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink the crust out of your eyes and look around. The room is a small loft above a barn, and it's not yours. You've been allowed to crash here by a grumpy old woman with 3 teeth and a chicken named Justice. The floor creaks with every breath you take. A few skinny rats scurry under the hay. One pauses to glare at you with something like judgment. You consider naming him Sir Whiskers. You crawl over to the edge of the loft and peek down. Below, 2 cows chew loudly and stink impressively. The farmer is already yelling at someone outside. Time to get up. Your clothes are a scratchy wool tunic, some kind of itchy leggings tied with twine, and wooden shoes that appear to have been crafted with a spoon, and some light cursing. You try to stand and immediately feel the results of sleeping on bare straw. Your back sounds like popcorn, and your knees wobble like undercooked noodles. There's no bathroom. That was optimistic of you. You shuffle down a rickety ladder and wander outside, where the air hits you with a new wave of smells: smoke, livestock, and human funk. The village is already awake. Chickens wander freely. A dog the size of a loaf growls at you. Somewhere nearby, someone is already hammering, probably a blacksmith or someone just trying to make life louder. A stream trickles through the village, grayish and bubbly. It's technically water, but also the place where everyone dumps their waste, washes their clothes, and sometimes they're dead. You splash a bit on your face anyway, and immediately regret it. It's colder than regret, and twice as likely to give you typhoid. You head back inside, hoping to find something to eat, but instead, you find Justice the chicken sitting in the middle of the floor, like she owns the place. She probably does. You reach for a piece of bread left on the table, only to find it's as hard as a rock and covered in what might be weevils. They skitter when you breathe on them. You're starting to wonder how people actually survived this. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant had it truly worse than we imagine, or if we've romanticized the past to death with all those movies and minstrel songs. You know what's not romantic? Stepping outside and immediately into a mud puddle the size of a kiddie pool. Without socks. A neighbor nods at you. He's got no teeth, a lazy eye, and a cheerful demeanor, like he knows exactly what kind of day you're about to have. He says something in Middle English that sounds like blessings upon ya, but you're pretty sure it's actually, you look like you slept in pig straw. Fair. You try to smile back, but your lips are frozen. It's spring, technically, but the kind of spring that feels like winter's aftershock. Your breath fogs. Your stomach growls. And suddenly, you realize how far modern comforts really are. No phone, no bathroom, no coffee. Not even socks. Fun fact, back in the day, people didn't wake up once and go about their day. They often had segmented sleep, 2 chunks broken up by a couple of midnight hours. Some used that time to pray, tend fires, or whisper about local gossip. Others just stared at the dark and tried not to think about demons. You just tried to breathe through your mouth and not think about where that rat went. There's a strange comfort in the rhythm of the place, though. Everything happens slowly, like the world itself is half asleep. The village is tiny, maybe a couple dozen people, and everyone knows everyone, including you now, apparently. A small child stares at you while picking something off his face. You wave. He runs away. You walk through the village, trying not to slip in anything too suspicious. Your goal is unclear, maybe breakfast, maybe a bucket of clean water, if such a thing exists. You pass a cottage where a woman is making soap from animal fat. She waves with a hand that's very, very pink. You wave back. The entire town smells like a campfire and a petting zoo, but you're starting to get used to it. That's the terrifying part. Your modern brain is still screaming for coffee and your mattress, but something deeper, something primal, is adjusting. You catch yourself admiring a pile of wood and wondering how warm it would be if you curled up under it. But don't get cozy yet. This is only the beginning. You finally spot something that might pass for breakfast. An old woman hunched over a table with a loaf of bread and a clay pot. You inch closer, trying to appear humble and non-threatening, which is difficult in wooden shoes that clunk like hooves on cobblestone. She doesn't look up. She just gestures vaguely at the bread with one gnarled hand and mutters something that sounds like, "God be kind, take the stale." You pick up the bread. It's about the size of your fist, and so hard you could use it as a weapon in a pinch. You tap it against the table. It echoes. There's a small cup of what looks like watery ale next to it because apparently everyone drinks beer here, even kids. The water's not safe, so this small beer is your only hydration option. You sip it. It tastes like regret and warm barley. You break open the bread and immediately regret doing so. Something wriggles out. A small beetle. You try to play it cool, like this is normal, which it is, but your face doesn't get the memo. The woman finally looks up, eyes twinkling. "Adds protein," she says and cackles. And there it is, your first bite of authentic medieval breakfast. Crunchy, musty, and definitely not gluten-free. This is where the "you probably wouldn't survive this" reality check hits. You're used to eggs, cereal, maybe even a fancy smoothie with spirulina. Here, you get insect surprise and lukewarm ale. And this isn't even famine season. You glance around. Everyone else seems fine, grimy but cheerful, like this is just how life goes. And it is. The average medieval peasant didn't expect pleasure from food. Eating was about fuel, not fun. Bread was life, literally the cornerstone of survival. And if you were lucky, it was made with actual grain, and not just filler like sawdust or crushed peas. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were consistently that bad, or if we underestimate the diversity of medieval food. Some villages had access to gardens, herbs, and seasonal produce. But what you've just eaten would be considered a decent start to the day. You try not to think about lunch. You wipe crumbs, or what you hope are crumbs, from your shirt and step back outside. It's still misty, and the ground is still sucking at your shoes like it wants to keep you forever. Across the path, a man is gnawing on a cold onion like it's an apple. He offers you a nod, then sneezes violently and keeps chewing. His nose drips into his beard. It's too early for this. You follow the movement of others, because nothing in this village comes with instructions. You trail behind a few women carrying baskets and eventually find yourself standing in a large field, staring at rows of half-wilted crops and a wooden fence where crows are already settling like tiny, feathery judges. A boy no older than 10 hands you a long stick with bits of fabric tied to the end. He points to the far end of the field and says, "Go scare 'em. They like to test the new ones." You look at your weapon. It's basically a broomstick having an identity crisis. Still, you trudge toward the field, feet squelching with every step, and start your new job. Human scarecrow. Turns out, Scarecrows weren't always made of straw. Sometimes they were made of you. A live person walking back and forth, waving arms, shouting at birds, maybe even clapping stones together like a confused percussionist. You are now that percussionist. You reach your assigned zone and start waving the stick like you mean it. A crow cocks its head, entirely unfazed. You yell, "Shoo!" and another crow yawns. You wave harder, your arms already regretting every decision that brought you here. A third crow lands closer, just to mock you. You're not scaring them. You're entertaining them. Your hands are freezing, your toes are already numb, and your stomach is trying to figure out how to digest whatever that bread was made from. You've been here half an hour, and your modern immune system is drafting its resignation letter. You stomp your feet to keep warm, and the mud slurps at your shoes. You think about all the people in history who started their days just like this, cold, tired, and very aware of the limited joys in their immediate future. Fun tidbit. Some scarecrow shouters used to carry dried animal bladders filled with pebbles to shake at birds. You just have a breeze-rattling stick and a growing suspicion that one crow is taking notes. Suddenly, there's a sharp whistle behind you. You turn. The boy is waving you over again, looking unimpressed. "You're useless at it," he says. "Come on, you're patching today." Within 10 minutes, you're up a ladder that creaks like it's writing its last will and testament. You're told the thatch is leaking, and the man below you keeps yelling instructions that don't make sense. Tuck it with a grain, not against it. You smile and nod and proceed to do the opposite, because what grain? You're standing in a roofed jungle of wet reeds and panic. Fun fact, thatched roofs were rarely cleaned. Insects loved them. Birds nested in them. Sometimes rats. You wedge a bundle of straw into the hole and immediately feel something wriggling under your hand. You pretend it's a breeze. It's probably not. Historians still argue whether peasants had time to fix their own homes, or if the Lord's steward sent someone to help now and then. Either way, you're definitely doing it alone today. After about 20 minutes of thatch stuffing, you're called down for mid-morning bite. A girl hands you a hunk of boiled root vegetable, turnip, maybe, and a grayish boiled egg that looks like it died twice. It's cold. You're cold. And there's no salt, no pepper, no joy. You chew slowly, thinking about brunch back home and whether you ever fully appreciated hash browns. The egg cracks oddly when you bite it, and the yolk is greenish. You eat it anyway. You don't want to seem ungrateful. But deep down, a part of you cries. Then it's back to work, this time carrying firewood. The logs are wet, heavy, and stacked in awkward bundles tied with rope. There are no gloves. Your fingers are raw within minutes. You accidentally drop one and get scolded by an older man who's got one eye and no indoor voice. "Back's your shovel, not your hands," he shouts, which you don't understand but nod to anyway. Everyone moves in rhythm, slow, steady, grimly efficient. The fields, the animals, the smoke curling from chimneys, all feel like they've existed forever. You, however, feel like you've been here 6 months and aged 10 years. By midday, your entire body aches. You smell like wood smoke, sour ale, and unwashed humanity. And the worst part? This is a good village. No bandits, no warlords, no plague, yet. Just honest, bone-deep exhaustion, and a growing hunger you're too scared to admit. You sit near the well, watching a woman wring out what used to be a shirt in a basin filled with grayish water. She catches your eye, smiles softly, and says, "You'll toughen up, or you'll die quick." Charming. You're sore in places you didn't even know existed, and it's not even noon. When someone calls out that the pigs are loose again, you make the classic mistake of turning your head and making eye contact. And just like that, you're volunteered. Now you're chasing pigs down a muddy lane, slipping every third step, waving your arms like you're trying to signal a plane that doesn't exist yet. The pigs? They're smarter than you. They dodge, they weave, they squeal with delight. You, on the other hand, get a face full of dirt and the very real feeling that medieval livestock is judging you. Eventually, an old man with a limp and a bucket of scraps comes along and gets them back in the pen with a few grunts and a cluck of his tongue. You watch him in awe, panting like you've just run a marathon, which, in a way, you have. City hands, he mutters and walks away. You brush yourself off, which only spreads the mud, and start noticing the smells more acutely now. Animal waste. Unwashed humans. Smoke. The faint copper tang of something dead somewhere. It's a cocktail of odors that doesn't so much linger as it does punch you in the nostrils every few seconds. You think about bathing. Silly modern brain. Bathing isn't a thing you just do here. Medieval folks didn't have daily hygiene rituals like you do. In fact, historians still argue whether medieval peasants even considered full-body washing necessary. Some evidence suggests that weekly or monthly rinses were the norm, often in cold water, possibly with lye soap, which is basically angry chalk. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's talk toilets. You ask someone where to go, and they squint at you like you've just asked where the unicorn stable is. You mean for your business? They ask, lowering their voice. You nod, desperate. They gesture toward a wooden shack behind a pigsty. Just watch for the wasps. Inside, it's a single plank with a hole in it. Below, a pit that smells like despair and old soup. No toilet paper, of course not. A rough pile of moss sits nearby, but you eye it suspiciously. The other option is a corncob. You suddenly understand why people in history looked so grumpy in paintings. You try to brace yourself, but nothing prepares you for the sheer vulnerability of relieving yourself while a pig snorts 5 feet away and the wind whistles through the wooden slats like a judgmental ghost. You stumble out of the outhouse, grateful to be done, but less confident in your digestive system than you were 10 minutes ago. You head toward the village center again, and a group of children run past you, shrieking with laughter. They're covered in dirt and barefoot, one of them carrying what looks like a stick with a dead frog tied to it. Is it a toy? Is it lunch? You don't ask. Children in the Middle Ages grew up fast. Like, real fast. By the age of 7, many were already helping in the fields, carrying water or learning trades. School? Only for the rich or the clergy. If you were lucky, someone might teach you how to sign your name or read a prayer. Otherwise, life was your classroom, and the lessons were mostly don't die. A young girl with tangled hair walks up to you holding something behind her back. You brace yourself. She holds out a squirming toad and says, "Wanna kiss it?" You jump back, and she howls with laughter before skipping off. You hear someone mutter, "She's the baker's one." Always with the toads. Quirky medieval reality check. People believed toads and frogs had magical properties, sometimes healing, sometimes cursed. The line between medicine and superstition was a wobbly one, to put it mildly. Now you're sent to help with water. You're handed a wooden yoke to carry 2 buckets from the village well to the cook's hut. Sounds easy. Until the yoke slams into your collarbone, and the buckets sway like drunken toddlers with every step. Water sloshes out. Your arms are shaking. The cook just shakes her head and says, 3 more trips. By the 2nd trip, your hands have developed new blisters. By the 3rd, you can't feel your shoulders. But now it's time for lunch, or what passes for it. Everyone gathers around a pot hanging over a smoky fire. The stew inside is gray-brown, with visible chunks of root vegetables and something you can only hope isn't rat. A boy pokes the pot and says, "Smells better than last week." A ladle of this thick, hot slurry is plopped into a shared wooden bowl. You and 3 others eat from it in turns, using wooden spoons. The etiquette is, don't slurp, don't hog the meat, and don't drop your spoon in the bowl. You follow 2 out of 3. It's not awful. It's warm, and that's enough. The stew's probably got barley, onion, cabbage, and maybe a piece of salted pork if you're lucky. You chew slowly, trying to savor what little flavor there is. You feel eyes on you and realize you've lingered too long. The next person elbows you gently. Time to pass it on. Historians still debate how communal peasant meals really were. Some argue that extended families shared food, while others think nuclear units ate separately when possible. But in this village, the system seems very first come, first served. After lunch, there's no nap, no break, no moment of silence. Instead, you're handed a rake and told to help with hay. If you thought hay smelled fresh and pastoral, you've never worked with it. It's itchy, heavy, and filled with tiny things that crawl. Your eyes water, your throat itches, and within 10 minutes, you've inhaled enough straw dust to build your own miniature thatch roof. You glance around and realize something else. Everyone here is thin. Not lean, not fit, thin. Wiry, weathered, sun-baked. Life here burns calories like a furnace. No one counts carbs because there aren't any to count. You think back to your gym membership, to the protein shakes and carefully measured macros. Here, if you can lift a pig and not faint, you're in shape. At one point, you lean against a fence post to catch your breath. A man next to you, shirtless, sunburned, and missing 3 fingers, says, "You're doing fine." First day's always worst. Then he spits and returns to work. You want to ask him what happens on the second day, but you're afraid of the answer. The sun is climbing higher now, and the air smells of manure, sweat, and simmering onions. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. A church bell rings once, signaling something you don't understand, but everyone else seems to respond to. Someone tosses you a worn sack and says, "Get potatoes from the south field. And mind the bees." You blink. Bees? The south field looks deceptively peaceful. Lush greenery under the bright sky, a faint breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. But you're not fooled. Somewhere out there, bees lurk like winged assassins, waiting to introduce you to medieval apiculture the hard way. You trudge past rows of rough-planted crops, carrots, onions, a few skinny leeks, and finally arrive at the edge of a lumpy field with thick soil. A young boy hands you a blunt wooden spade and says, "Dig near the flags. Don't stab 'em." He runs off before you can ask what a flag even looks like. You kneel and start poking at the soil. After half an hour of grunting, clawing, and swatting at horseflies that seem personally offended by your presence, you unearth a clump of potatoes. They're small, wrinkly, and vaguely threatening.
You toss them into your sack with a sigh.
Then you hear the buzz. You freeze. Somewhere near the next row, a hive hangs low from a gnarled tree branch. The bees aren't just busy, they're furious. You back away slowly, sack clutched like a teddy bear. "Mind the bees," the boy had said. He could have mentioned they were the medieval security system. Your retreat ends with a trip over a root. You land hard, sack first, and the thud gets their attention. One bee dive bombs your forehead. Another targets your ear. You run. No dignity, no plan, just full-on cartoon-style panic sprinting across uneven ground. A passing farmer yells, "Don't flail. You look like a flower." By the time you reach the safety of a stream, you're panting, sweating, and wondering if allergic reactions existed before EpiPens. You dunk your head in the cool water and just lie there, face first, listening to the gentle burble of nature and your heart pounding in protest. At some point, an older woman walks by with a basket of turnips and doesn't even blink. "Bees again?" she asks. You lift a muddy thumb in confirmation. She chuckles and mutters, "Could be worse. Could be the geese." You sit up, water dripping from your nose. "What about the geese?" you ask, already regretting it. "Feisty things. Guard the grain shed like knights. Best let someone else deal with them." You make a mental note. Avoid the geese. Back at the village, your sack of potatoes gets inspected. A man with a nose like a hawk holds one up, squints, then nods. "Not bad for a first-timer," he says. "Only mildly bruised." You consider this high praise. Someone announces that the farrier is in town, and the blacksmith could use a hand. You perk up. Finally, something with fire and metal. You imagine forging swords, hammering glowing iron, maybe getting a cool soot smudge on your cheek like in the movies. Instead, you're handed a bucket of manure and told to help clean horse hooves. The farrier is a gruff woman with forearms like tree trunks. She lifts a horse's leg with ease and starts inspecting the hoof. "Hold the bucket there," she says, jerking her chin. You hold it. She scrapes out a horrifying mix of mud, dung, and compacted hay into it. You gag quietly. The horse snorts. You look into its eyes and silently apologize for all the glue jokes you've ever made. While the farrier trims and shapes a new horseshoe, she explains the process. Blacksmithing, it turns out, is less about epic weapon making and more about endless maintenance. Farmers bring in broken tools, worn plow parts, and cracked hinges. And yes, the occasional weapon, but only if there's a skirmish nearby. Mainstream fact: blacksmiths were among the most vital trades in a medieval village, and not just for military gear. Without them, no one could fix carts, cook with iron pots, or shoe horses. Fringe tidbit? Some believed blacksmiths had mystical powers because they could manipulate fire and metal. A few villages even kept blacksmiths separate, fearing their work could curse the harvest. You're just impressed she can hammer molten metal without flinching. She lets you try. You lift the hammer and miss the anvil entirely, striking the wooden block beside it. Everyone nearby winces. You sheepishly hand it back. The farrier sighs. Maybe stick to buckets for now. You're starting to accept your role in this ecosystem, the lowest rung, the one that bruises potatoes and spills water. You wipe your brow and move on, drawn to the scent of baking. Near the edge of the village, the communal oven smokes steadily. The baker, yes, the one with the toad kid, waves you over. Fire needs stoking. And if you don't mind flour in your lungs, I could use a hand kneading. You agree before asking what kneading involves. 10 minutes later, you're elbow deep in dough that clings to your arms like medieval quicksand. The baker slaps it like it owes him money, folds it, and repeats. You try to mimic him, and the dough retaliates by slapping you. Needs more salt, he says, tasting a pinch. Or maybe that's just my sweat. Delicious. He explains that most villagers eat coarse rye bread, sometimes mixed with oat or barley. Wheat? Too fancy. That's for nobles and monks. He lifts a flat round from the oven, knocks the bottom, and listens. Hollow sound means it's baked, just like skulls around here. It's a joke, but you wonder if it's true. You help him prepare a batch for tomorrow. It's hard, hot work, but the oven's warmth feels oddly soothing. He throws you a crust of fresh bread, warm and dense. You bite into it and it's chewy. Really chewy. But edible. Maybe the best thing you've eaten all day. Don't get used to it, he warns. Tomorrow's batch might be sour. Historians still argue whether medieval bread was deliberately soured, naturally fermented, or just the unfortunate result of wild yeast. Either way, it was filling. And in times of famine, people even mixed ground bark or pea flour into their loaves to stretch supplies. You finish your crumb-dusted moment of peace when someone from the manor calls out. The reeve, a sort of village manager, wants extra hands for inspection. You follow the crowd to a gathering in the open field. A nobleman on horseback sits beneath a fluttering banner, surrounded by guards. He's clean, well, cleaner than you, and wears dyed wool that practically screams, "I don't touch dirt." He's here for rent. Everyone lines up with baskets, livestock, sacks of grain, offerings in lieu of coins. You get a crash course in feudal economics, and it isn't pretty. Peasants didn't really own their land. They worked it in exchange for protection and the right to stay alive. In return, they paid rent with crops, eggs, labor, or occasionally actual money, if they were incredibly lucky. The noble steward checks each offering like a supermarket manager inspecting inventory. One poor soul's grain looks damp. He's told to pay double next season. You're not sure what happens if he can't. You don't ask. The noble says nothing. He just nods, bored, while his horse stamps impatiently. When the reeve introduces you as a strange outsider from the hills, the noble raises a single eyebrow. Teach him manners, he says. And clean clothes. You try to smile. It doesn't go well. Eventually, the crowd disperses. The day's nearly done. You've chased pigs, battled bees, shoveled hoof gunk, been slapped by bread, and nearly insulted a nobleman. And it's not even dinner yet. You return to your hovel. Yes, yours now, where the straw mattress feels like luxury. Someone passes you a bowl of broth, thin and oily. You eat in silence. Outside, crickets start chirping. Inside, your muscles throb with exhaustion. You're told that tomorrow will be easier. You don't believe them. You close your eyes and sigh. You wake up coughing. The inside of your hovel is fogged with smoke, not from fire, but from the neighbor's hearth leaking through a crack in the wall. You sit up, eyes watering, muscles aching in places you didn't know existed. Your mouth tastes like sleep and last night's onion broth. Outside, it's barely dawn, but the village is already alive. Roosters scream like feathered alarm clocks, carts rattle over hard-packed earth, and someone nearby is definitely yelling at a goat. You stretch, regret it immediately, then shuffle toward the center of town, where breakfast is, in theory, a thing. Breakfast in medieval times isn't eggs, toast, and a flat white. It's whatever you've got. Today, it's a chunk of last night's bread, now hard enough to qualify as a weapon, and a weak ale served lukewarm. Yes, ale, for breakfast. Water is a gamble, and you're not rolling those dice before noon. You sip cautiously. It's sour, earthy, and has the faintest note of barn. You chew the bread until your jaw clicks, then join a group heading toward the town boundary. Today, you're part of the watch team, which sounds cool until you realize it involves standing in a tower for hours, looking for invaders who probably aren't coming. Still, it beats shoveling things. The tower's not tall, just a 2-story wooden platform with a decent view of fields and forest. You climb up and settle beside an old man missing several teeth and smelling faintly of salted fish. He nods at you. Don't fall asleep. Or off. Duly noted. The first hour is peaceful. The sun rises over the trees, warming your face. The village spreads below you, buzzing with morning energy. It's almost nice. And then you hear it. Church bells. They echo from the abbey on the hill, long, deep, and rhythmic. You glance at your companion, who shrugs. Matins. Time for prayers. You don't go. You're not required yet. But most of the village trickles toward the small chapel near the manor, muttering and crossing themselves. You watch from the tower, curious. Mainstream fact. Religion in medieval life wasn't just belief. It was structure. Bells marked time. Saints marked seasons. Your calendar, your diet, your laws, even your days off, were built around the church. You ask the old man how often they pray. He chuckles. 7 times a day if you're a monk. Less if you've got a pig to chase.
Fair.
He squints toward the road. Traveler, he says, pointing. Sure enough, a lone figure walks the muddy road toward the village, cloaked and bent under a pack. A traveler, yes, but maybe also a merchant. Or a spy. Or worse, a tax collector. You tense, ready to sound some kind of alarm. Instead, your companion shouts down to a boy below. Visitor. The boy runs off, and within minutes, the reeve arrives. He greets the stranger at the gate. After some back and forth, the traveler is allowed in. No drama. No sword fights. Just cautious hospitality. Still, you're warned. Don't trust strangers too quickly. Could be a peddler, the old man says. Could be plague.
Plague.
You hadn't thought about that. People here fear it like the modern world fears Wi-Fi outages. Only deadlier. The Black Death wiped out entire villages a century ago, and though it's not currently raging, everyone knows it could return at any moment. Fringe tidbit. Some medieval folks believed plague was caused by bad air, miasma, or even sin. Others blamed foreigners, cats, or even an unlucky alignment of planets. Astrology met epidemiology, and nobody came out ahead. You shudder and look down at your hands, suddenly hyper-aware of every cough, sneeze, and mysterious itch you've felt since arriving. Your watch shift ends, and you climb down, mildly paranoid. Back in the village square, the traveler is setting up shop. A small blanket with knives, thread, beads, and a single comb made of bone. Kids gather, wide-eyed. You linger at the edge, unsure if you're allowed to browse without a goat to trade. The reeve watches closely. If you've got nothing to barter, move along.
Right.
Instead, you find yourself drafted for latrine duty, a phrase that really should come with hazard pay. You're handed a spade and a cart and sent to the back fields where the village's waste is, politely, dealt with. It smells exactly as you feared. You shovel, gag, and try not to cry. It's necessary work, they tell you. Waste management is one of those invisible gears that keeps everything running. In the medieval world, no plumbing means someone has to do it. Today, that someone is you. You pass the dung heap used for fertilizing fields. It steams gently in the sun, like some cursed fondue. The farmer nearby waves at you cheerily. You wave back with your clean hand. "Smells healthy," he says. You're not convinced. Historians still argue whether medieval sanitation was as bad as we assume. Some towns had surprisingly advanced waste channels. Others not so much. Rural villages mostly relied on distance. Keep the mess away from the well, and you're golden. You clean up, wash in the stream, again, and decide you've earned some rest. You wander toward the outskirts of the village, following the sound of music. A group is dancing, poorly, around a fiddler. The tune is quick, bright, and oddly catchy. A few clumsy steps, a lot of laughter. You're pulled in before you can protest. It's not elegant. It's not rehearsed. But it's joyful. For once, you forget your aching limbs and just move, hopping and stomping with the rest. Someone slaps your back. A girl in a linen dress spins beside you. A dog barks along, totally offbeat. Laughter rolls through the crowd. This right here, is the unexpected part of medieval life. Yes, it's hard, dirty, and unfair. But people still find moments to smile, to sing, to dance badly under the fading sun. Even in the worst centuries, joy finds cracks to bloom through. When the music ends, you collapse into the grass, panting and grinning. Fireflies blink above the fields. The village glows warm with torchlight. Someone starts roasting something over a fire, and the scent makes your stomach growl. Dinner tonight is better. A thin stew with turnips, a hint of salt, and even a piece of dried meat. You eat slowly, savoring every bite. Your neighbor leans over. "Still alive?" she asks. "Barely," you reply. She nods with approval. "Then you're learning." You lie back, eyes drifting to the stars. So many more than you're used to. No light pollution. Just ancient, endless sky. And geese. Somewhere, always the geese. You're yanked out of sleep by something cold and wet.
A dog.
Someone's mangy, mud-crusted mutt has decided your face is a suitable dish. You sputter, shove it off, and groggily remember you fell asleep near the fire after yesterday's dancing. Your back protests. Your legs feel like they've been pickled. It's still dark, but the village is already murmuring awake. Somewhere, a blacksmith starts hammering. The sound rings out, sharp, metallic, and constant. You wince. There's no such thing as sleeping in here. There's also no coffee. Tragic. You shuffle toward the well with a dented mug. The water is icy, slightly murky, and somehow tastes of old wood and moss.
You drink anyway.
Hydration is hydration. Today, you've been assigned to help at the forge. That sounds exciting until you realize your job isn't crafting swords or horseshoes. It's working the bellows. That means pumping a massive set of leather lungs to keep the forge hot while someone else does the fun stuff. The blacksmith is a hulking man with soot in his eyebrows and permanent burns on both forearms. He nods at you once, hands you the bellows rope, and gets to work. You pull, and pull, and pull. It's like arm day at the gym, except the gym is on fire and there's no playlist. The blacksmith molds metal like it's clay. Sparks fly with every strike. You're mesmerized. The blade he's working on, short, heavy, clearly made for serious business, glows bright orange before being dunked in water. Steam blasts your face. You ask if it's a sword. He snorts. A cleaver. For pigs.
Right.
Mainstream fact, not every blacksmith forged weapons. Most made tools, plows, nails, hinges. Swords were expensive and specialized, often made by dedicated armorers in cities or by commission. You help mold some nails next. It's oddly satisfying, but your arms are shaking and your palms are blistering. You wonder if you'll ever feel your shoulders again. At midday, the smith lets you go. Good pullin', go eat. You stagger out, hands trembling. The stew pot is still hanging from last night, but someone's added herbs. It smells amazing. You're mid-bite when someone taps your shoulder. A boy no older than 10 grins at you. "Want to see something weird?" You shrug.
Sure.
Why not? He leads you past the edge of the village, toward the woods. It's shady, quiet, and filled with that earthy, green smell that only real forests carry. He points to a tree stump and says, "Touch it." You do. Nothing happens. He giggles. Now look up. A small shrine is built into the tree, a little wooden carving of a woman with leaves in her hair, moss growing on her shoulders. Candles, long burnt out, sit at her feet. "That's the Green Lady," the boy says. "She keeps the forest safe." You blink. Fringe tidbit. Long after Christianity took over Europe, many villagers held on to older, local traditions. Tree spirits, river sprites, and household ghosts quietly lived on beside saints and sermons. Folk religion wasn't just tolerated, it was often woven into everyday belief. You thank the boy, who runs off to climb a tree.
Alone now, you sit beneath the shrine.
Birds flit overhead. Something rustles nearby, maybe a deer, maybe something else. You're not brave enough to investigate. Back in the village, something's happening near the manor house. A group of peasants, dozens of them, are gathered, murmuring. At the center, the reeve, a few armed men, and the nobleman who technically owns the land. He's dressed in finer wool than everyone else, with a belt that probably costs more than your entire existence. He's smiling, but not kindly. Turns out it's tax day. The villagers line up, each carrying a basket, a sack, or a coin pouch. You watch as people hand over chickens, grain, even a small goat. The noble inspects each item like he's judging a bake-off. You ask what happens if someone can't pay. An old woman near you mutters, "Work or prison."
Cool.
Historians still argue whether feudal taxes were crushing or merely inconvenient, depending on the time, place, and lord in question. But today, it feels crushing. One man protests.
Says he gave last week.
The noble waves his hand. The guards step forward. There's no violence, just quiet pressure. The man backs down. You spot the girl who danced beside you yesterday. She hands over a bundle of herbs. The noble sniffs them, shrugs, and takes them. You wonder if your sweatshirt would count as payment. Probably not. The reeve sees you watching and calls you over. "Can you read?" You blink.
Yeah.
He hands you a wax tablet and a stylus. "Write what I say." Suddenly, you're the note-taker. He rattles off names and payments. You scratch crude letters onto the wax. Your spelling is questioned. Your grip is mocked. But you manage. Turns out literacy is rare. And useful. Mainstream fact. In most medieval villages, the ability to read and write, even just a little, was enough to land you special work. Monks, scribes, and reeves often held real power simply by knowing their ABCs. As the sun lowers, the villagers disperse, lighter of goods but not of spirit. Someone breaks out a fiddle again. A small fire is lit. Bread is passed around. You eat in silence, overwhelmed. You've learned a lot today. How metal bends, how taxes bite, how trees can hold forgotten gods. Your muscles throb. Your stomach's uncertain. But you're still standing. A girl passes you a chunk of cheese. "You look less pale than yesterday," she says. "Progress," you reply. A drunk old man starts singing about a cow who danced with the devil. Everyone joins in by the second verse. You hum along off-key. And for a brief moment, under a sky bruised with stars, you feel like you belong here. Then someone brings out a skin of mead. And things go downhill fast. You wake up to your own snoring. Face down in hay, mouth dry, and with a mead-fueled headache that could stun an ox, you sit up slowly. Your neck pops in protest. Someone has draped a wool blanket over you. Kindness or a prank unclear. A chicken sits beside you, watching with judgmental eyes. Your mouth tastes like old pennies and regret. The sun's higher than it should be. You've slept in, and someone will definitely have noticed. Late risers aren't trendy in the medieval age. They're suspicious. Lazy.
Possibly possessed.
You hurry to the communal area near the manor. A woman with arms like bread loaves thrusts a broom at you. You missed morning prayers. You can sweep.
So you sweep.
And sneeze. And sweep again. The village smells like animals and wet wood, and now your hands do too. Straw, dirt, and occasional mystery lumps go flying under your care. Someone tells you off for scattering it the wrong way. And just like that, you've been demoted from broom wielder to dung scooper. There is no HR department to appeal this. Mainstream fact: in a medieval village, labor was divided by need, not passion. You didn't find your calling. Your calling was often whatever job no one else wanted today. Career paths were fluid. While gathering manure for compost, truly, your highlight reel is building itself. You notice something odd: a ring of small mushrooms in the grass just beyond the village. A fairy circle. You hesitate. In your world, it's just a fun mycology fact. Here it's different. The same boy from yesterday runs up and whispers, "Step inside," and you disappear. He grins. You don't. Fringe tidbit: fairy rings were believed to be portals, places where the veil between worlds was thin. Villagers might avoid them or leave offerings. The belief wasn't just for children. Even adults shaped their behavior around such folklore. You skirt around it just in case. Better safe than spirited away. The afternoon brings unexpected drama. Word spreads quickly. Someone's pig is missing. You'd think a lost pig wouldn't cause a stir. You'd be wrong. Pigs are valuable, walking food banks. The owner, a wiry man with a nose like a hawk's beak, is furious. He accuses his neighbor of theft. Loudly, with passion, they shout. Others gather. The reeve arrives, holding a staff that looks purely symbolic. Still, it works. Everyone simmers down. Then comes the pig trial. You're not joking. Pig trials, of humans stealing pigs, not pigs themselves, though yes, pigs were occasionally tried for crimes too, were actual village events. They combined justice with public entertainment. The accused swears he didn't take it. His yard is searched. Nothing. The reeve frowns. Then it must be the woods. Everyone sighs. The forest has claimed many things: chickens, children, the occasional sheep.
And pigs.
Especially pigs. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed in forest spirits, or if they just needed someone to blame when animals vanished. Either way, you're drafted into the search party. Into the woods you go again, this time with a dozen villagers, torches, and one old man with a crossbow he clearly doesn't know how to load. The trees close in. You hear birds, twigs snapping, someone muttering about fairy theft. It's hard not to feel a little spooked. You tread carefully, keeping your eyes peeled for signs of pig. Eventually you find it, or rather it finds you. A rustle, a grunt, and then a blur of pink flesh bolts from the underbrush and barrels into your shins. You fall over. The pig squeals and bolts. Everyone cheers. The hunt begins. You chase through branches and roots, tripping over everything nature ever invented. Finally, the pig is cornered near a stream. The hawk-nosed man throws a rope. Miraculously, it lands. He hauls the pig back in triumph. Justice, medieval style. Back at the village, you're treated to stew again, this time laced with onion and pride. Everyone talks about the pig like it was a dragon. You bask in a little reflected glory, even if your role was mostly falling dramatically. As the sky turns golden, you're called over by the reeve. He gestures toward a small stone chapel at the edge of the village. "You can write," he says. "Help the priest." You nod, still sore from pig wrangling, but curious. Inside the chapel, it's cool and dim. Candles flicker against stone. A thin, gray-haired priest nods at you, his eyes sunken but kind. He shows you a table with parchment, ink, and a quill so worn it looks chewed. "Copy this," he says, handing you a text in Latin. You blink. Latin?
But you try.
Slowly, carefully, you trace each letter, mimicking strokes, feeling ink bleed into old parchment. It's oddly meditative. The priest watches in silence, correcting occasionally. Your hands stain black. Your eyes blur. Mainstream fact: copying manuscripts wasn't just for monasteries. Small parishes needed copies of scripture, records of births, deaths, and confessions. If you had even basic literacy, you could become indispensable. As night falls, the priest stops you. Good, he says simply. You'll return tomorrow. You nod, surprised at the warmth in your chest. Outside, the village is sleepy. Lamps glow in windows. Laughter trickles from one hut. A baby cries in another. A cat scurries across the path, tail high. You find your spot near the fire, lay down, and stretch sore limbs. Today, you chased pigs, dodged fairy rings, wrote fake Latin, and swept more hay than should legally exist. You've never felt dirtier. Or, weirdly more accomplished. Sleep takes you slowly tonight, like a lullaby sung by wind through trees. Somewhere an owl hoots. And beneath your dreams, the forest waits. Your dreams are strange. They start with a pig, crowned now, sitting atop a throne of firewood, ordering you to sweep the village endlessly with a spoon. Then it morphs into a choir of monks chanting in reverse while mushrooms sprout from your ears. You wake up disoriented and slightly insulted by your subconscious. It's barely light. Roosters crow like they're in competition, and you realize with horror that your blanket is moving. Wait, it's not your blanket. It's a goat. A full-grown, totally unfazed goat standing on your chest like you're part of its mountain terrain. You groan, it bleats, and saunters off without apology. Today is church day. Not Sunday Mass. This is a saint's feast day, which means extra prayers, extra processions, and extra pressure not to mess up. You're back at the chapel just after dawn. The priest hands you a list of names to recite, villagers who paid for prayers for their sick relatives. You read them slowly, awkwardly, in Latin, hoping no one notices when you trip over Johannes de Swinford. The chapel fills with villagers, kneeling, whispering, bowing. Some stare at you openly, like the strange outsider you are. A few smile. One boy picks his nose while maintaining unwavering eye contact. Mainstream fact: religion was central to every aspect of medieval life. The church wasn't just spiritual, it was governmental, educational, and social. Even minor feast days were treated seriously, with entire communities participating. The priest leads a slow, chanting procession around the chapel. You carry a candle that's probably older than you, trying not to drop hot wax on your sleeve. Bells ring, and incense clouds the air until your eyes sting, and your stomach starts growling. The ceremony stretches on. Eventually, you're dismissed to help with the real highlight of any feast day: food. The village green becomes a pop-up festival if your idea of a festival includes dried turnips, tough bread, and ale that tastes like fermented wheatgrass. But spirits are high. Children run with sticks. Someone plays a battered flute. There's even dancing, sort of. Fringe tidbit: medieval dancing was less graceful waltz and more stomp in a circle and shout. Many dances were communal, repetitive, and deeply symbolic. No TikTok trends here, just raw cardio and yelling. You're pulled into a spinning dance by a girl with freckles and strong hands. You don't know the steps, but no one cares. Laughter is louder than rhythm, and for a moment, you forget you're a 21st century softie in wool socks. Then someone grabs your arm. It's the Reeve. The tanner's in trouble, he says. You blink. Tanner. Man who makes leather. His shed caught fire. You rush with him to the edge of the village, where acrid smoke curls from a low wooden building. The tanner, shirtless and ash-covered, is trying to smother flames with a sack. Others join in. You grab a bucket and join the chain, passing water from the well. The fire's small but stubborn, and the smoke makes your eyes water. Eventually, with half the village soaked and gasping, the flames are out. The tanner groans. His tools are scorched, his hides ruined. Leather was his livelihood, and repairing everything will take weeks, maybe months. Historians still argue whether medieval communities truly operated on tight-knit mutual aid, or if people simply helped out to maintain social standing. Here, you're seeing both. By evening, villagers have already started bringing him supplies: wood, scraps, even food. The blacksmith promises to repair the metal tools. The priest offers spare candles and some herbs for burns. It's a moment of surprising solidarity, and you feel it in your ribs. Later, you help the tanner scrub soot from his remaining tools. He talks about tanning, about soaking hides in lye and urine, yes, actual urine, to soften them. You try not to gag. He laughs. Leather's life, he says. Smells like death, though. Mainstream fact: tanning was one of the dirtiest and essential trades. Tanners worked with animal skins, human waste, and foul-smelling chemicals. Their workshops were often on the outskirts of towns for obvious olfactory reasons. As the sun dips, people gather again on the green. This time for something unexpected: a puppet show. A traveling performer has arrived, his cart loaded with crude marionettes and patchy curtains. Children swarm, squealing with anticipation. Adults linger, pretending not to care. The show begins. It's simple, ridiculous, and wildly inappropriate by modern standards. One puppet represents a bishop. Another is a farting demon. They argue over a stolen chicken. At one point, the chicken explodes. You are crying laughing. Fringe tidbit: medieval puppetry wasn't always wholesome. Shows often mocked authority figures, churchmen, nobles, even kings. It was a rare outlet for satire in a highly controlled society. Scholars still debate how much censorship puppet masters actually faced. The performance ends with a mock blessing and a pie in the face, made of straw and mud.
Kids cheer.
You cheer louder. As darkness blankets the sky, torches are lit. Music returns. Couples sneak off into shadows. An older woman tells stories about saints and miracles. You sit beside her, listening, sipping ale, your limbs aching and your heart oddly full. A dog flops beside you, claiming your feet as a pillow. You let it. This world is brutal, smelly, and confusing, but it also has moments of joy, connection, and shared wonder. Things you didn't expect. You look up at the stars. There's no light pollution here, just the cosmos, glittering unfiltered above thatched roofs. Somewhere, a cow moos like it's ending a song. You smile. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it attacks you. First, it's the church bell, an offbeat, bone-rattling clang that feels personal. Then it's the rooster, once again screaming like it's auditioning for an opera. And finally, it's the dog from last night, now licking your toes like you owe it rent. You groan and sit up. Your back protests. Your legs feel like stone. Your mouth tastes like that tanner's leather smells. And the day hasn't even started. Today, you're off to the nearest market town, a half-day's walk away, to help the reeve collect grain owed by the village's tenants. He says it'll be fun. You doubt that. Strongly. You pack bread, some cheese, that's already trying to escape its own rind, and a sliver of salted meat. A stick becomes your walking staff. And you begin your trek along a dirt road that looks suspiciously like it just isn't mud today. Travel in medieval times was not exactly built for comfort. Mainstream fact: most medieval peasants never traveled more than a few miles from home in their entire lives. Roads were unreliable, maps were rare, and bandits were real. For the average person, the world was frighteningly small. The journey is long and bumpy. You pass hedgerows, skittish deer, and one goose who chases you for 20 yards like you insulted its ancestors. The reeve keeps a steady pace, occasionally pointing out landmarks. That stump? Some say it's haunted. That pond? Full of leeches. That bush? Don't eat the berries. You pass other travelers, traders with carts, a monk reciting prayers under his breath, and a woman dragging a pig on a rope like it's a reluctant toddler. Everyone gives the reeve a nod, and you a cautious glance. Eventually, the town appears on the horizon. Walls rise like jagged teeth, built from stone and ambition. At the gate, you're met by guards who inspect you with narrowed eyes, then wave you through. Inside, it's chaos in the most fascinating way. The market bustles. Stalls overflow with onions, clay pots, salted fish, ribbons, and even musical instruments. There's a man shouting about blessed relics that look suspiciously like chicken bones. A pig escapes, is tackled, escapes again, and disappears down an alley like it planned this for weeks. This place feels alive. The reeve disappears into business, leaving you to wander. You're overwhelmed. There's a blacksmith pounding red-hot iron. A baker pulling golden loaves from a wood-fired oven. A clothier measuring a very unwilling boy for what must be his first tunic. The smells clash: rosemary bread, manure, smoke, and human sweat, but somehow it all fits. You stop at a booth selling fruit. The vendor eyes you. Apple. You nod, hand over a coin borrowed from the reeve. You bite into it. It's mealy and sour, but you nod like it's divine. The vendor grins. Fringe tidbit. Most medieval fruit was more bitter or acidic than today's selectively bred varieties. A sweet apple in 1300 could still pucker your entire face. You pass an apothecary stand filled with jars of crushed herbs and unlabeled powders. The old woman behind it offers you something for spleen rattles, which you sincerely hope you don't have. Then comes the noise, raised voices, a small crowd gathering. You move closer. Two men are arguing loudly in front of a stall. One accuses the other of cheating on a weights and measures deal. The town constable is already there, pulling out a wooden device you recognize from a bad memory: the pillory. It's the local punishment for minor offenses. The accused is locked in, arms and head through wooden holes. Children throw cabbage. An old man offers philosophical advice that includes the phrase, "Don't trade with left-handed people." You stand frozen. This feels cruel. But then a baker leans in and mutters, "This is the third time he's cheated widows. Let him stew." Historians still argue whether public punishment was meant more to deter crime or simply to entertain the masses. Here, it's clearly doing both. The reeve returns with a cart of grain and 2 wheels of hard cheese. He's also acquired news. There's to be a mummers play this evening in the square. You stay for it. When the sun dips, a troupe of traveling actors, faces painted, clothes patchy and bright, set up a rough stage. The play involves a knight, a dragon, and a surprising number of fart jokes. The dragon is clearly a sack with teeth, but the kids scream anyway. The knight recites poetry in a voice like he's swallowed a trumpet. The dragon dances. At one point, a peasant character declares, "My boots are wiser than the king." The audience gasps and laughs. Mainstream fact: mummers' plays were one of the few ways the common folk could explore rebellion, identity, and satire in public. They often poked fun at authority under the guise of fiction and were tolerated, barely, by the elite. You watch, spellbound. It's crude. It's wild. It's unforgettable. As darkness fully falls, the reeve insists it's time to leave. The journey back feels shorter, even with sore legs and a belly full of something called mead, which tastes like fizzy honey and reckless decisions. You reach the village under moonlight. It's quiet now. Smoke rises from chimneys. A dog howls once, then stops. The world has gone soft at the edges. You crawl into your straw bed, goat-free this time, and close your eyes. Today was noisy,
Smelly. Silly.
and weirdly wonderful. You still don't belong here, not really. But part of you almost wishes you did. You wake to the sound of nothing, which is suspicious. No rooster, no bells, not even the dog. Just a heavy silence, like the world is holding its breath. Then, boom, a sudden crack of thunder.
Rain.
Biblical levels of it. Your straw mattress, already doing its best impression of a haystack, begins to soak through.
You sigh.
Today's lesson? Weather waits for no one. You throw on your dampest cloak, because it's somehow wetter inside than out, and prepare for what locals simply call a normal day. In medieval times, rain isn't a nuisance. It's a threat. The roof drips like a board faucet. Mud creeps in under the door, like it owns the place. And when you step outside, your shoes make that special squelch sound of complete surrender. Today, you're on duty for field work, and unfortunately, that means actual labor. Not cute gardening with a podcast in your ears, real, physical, back-breaking survival work. And today, you're lucky. It's plowing and sowing season. Mainstream fact: the entire village economy revolved around the agricultural calendar. If the planting failed, so did the food supply, taxation revenue, and even peace. A bad harvest meant famine, and nobody ate vibes. You're handed an ox. Well, a pair of them. And they smell exactly like you'd expect two animals with a diet of grass and no sense of personal space to smell. You're shown how to hitch them to the plow, a wooden monster that looks like it was invented by someone who hated straight lines and human backs. You push, the oxen resist. You pull, the plow catches on a rock. You trip, land in muck, and the reeve chuckles like this is a bonding exercise. The soil turns slowly, unevenly, but it turns. You pause, gasping, and a boy no older than 12 passes you, handling his own plow with grace. He flashes a sympathetic grin. You wave weakly and try to pretend your arms don't feel like overcooked noodles. Fringe tidbit: medieval plowmen developed intense calluses and hunched backs by their 20s. Hands were often blistered raw, and injuries from oxen kicks were treated with herbal pastes and whispered prayers. Around midday, the rain lessens into a mist, but the sky stays sulky. You huddle under a bare tree with a few others to eat, more bread, more cheese, more silent chewing. A man offers you a pickled egg. You decline. Firmly. Back to the field. This time, sowing seeds. You grip a sack slung over your shoulder and toss barley in wide arcs.
Or you try to.
Yours clumps. You're planting tragic little seed piles while the seasoned workers laugh kindly and fix your rows. Your legs are shaking. Your back protests in Latin. A woman next to you hums softly as she works. The tune is unfamiliar, sad but rhythmic. You ask about it.
Old song, she says.
Helps pass the time. My mother's mother sang it. Then she adds with a wink, also keeps the crows confused. The sun breaks through late in the afternoon. And just like that, the fields glow. Rows of fresh plowed earth stretch out like corduroy. People stop to wipe their brows. No one smiles, they're too tired, but there's pride. This will grow. Hopefully. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants lived lives of ceaseless misery or found quiet satisfaction in small victories like this. Today, it feels like both. You help return the oxen to the communal barn. One steps on your foot. You yelp in several pitches. At the barn, you get a closer look at the animal pens. Pigs grunt sleepily. Chickens peck at mud. A calf eyes you suspiciously from under its mother. You're told to help muck out a stall. It's exactly as fun as it sounds. You scrape old hay and worse things into a wheelbarrow. You try breathing through your mouth, which somehow makes it worse. A man advises rubbing mint under your nose. Another says, just get used to it. Both laugh. By the time you're done, your boots may never emotionally recover. Back at the village, someone lights a fire. The smoke swirls upward like a signal to heaven. We made it. Sort of. Supper is pottage again, this time with peas, which is a major event. Someone has an onion. It's shared like a sacred object. Mainstream fact: pottage was the daily staple, boiled grains, legumes, herbs, and sometimes scraps of meat. It simmered all day over the hearth, constantly being added to and rarely fully emptied. You eat slowly, too tired to speak. Your hands are stained. Your clothes are crusted. But the food is warm and the bench holds you up, so that counts as luxury. Then comes the knock. A messenger on horseback, drenched, breathless. He carries a scroll. The village gathers. The reeve reads aloud. There will be a church tithe collection next week. All must offer coin, grain, or livestock. Failure to comply is sin. Groans ripple through the crowd. One man mutters something about hiding a goat. Another swears he already tithed twice. You whisper to the reeve, "Didn't we just pay taxes?"
He sighs. Yes.
But the church isn't the king. You learn that medieval peasants paid not only rent to their lords, but tithes to the church, 10% of everything. If your harvest failed, you still owed. If your animals died, you still owed. Divine accounting had no grace period. Fringe tidbit: some rebellious villagers tried to forget their tithes. Others offered subpar goods, sour milk, sick chickens. One priest reportedly received a tithe of one-eyed goat and blasphemous cheese. He was not amused. That night, the reeve explains that soon, you'll help with repairs on the church roof. The thatch leaks and the stained glass rattles in wind. Bring gloves, he says. Unless you want another blister collection. You collapse into bed, limbs buzzing. Outside, the rain returns. The thatch catches most of it, but a few drops fall onto your forehead. You don't care. You've never been so tired. You've also never been this weirdly grounded. Like the rhythm of the earth is real, and you're part of it now. Whether you like it or not. You wake with a gasp. Not because of a nightmare, but because your legs refuse to move. Everything from your knees down feels like it's been replaced with concrete. You groan as you swing out of bed, only to realize your fingers are stiff too. Yesterday's field work wasn't just tiring, it was anatomically offensive. Too bad, though. There's no such thing as a rest day in the medieval schedule. Today is all about crafts and trades, and you're lucky enough to shadow the village blacksmith. Or unlucky, depending on how you feel about intense heat, relentless hammering, and the constant risk of losing a toe. The forge is already roaring when you arrive. Inside, the air is thick and metallic, like breathing in hot coins. The blacksmith, a barrel-chested man with soot-streaked arms, barely acknowledges you. He points to the bellows and grunts. You get to work. Mainstream fact, the blacksmith was a crucial figure in any medieval village. From horseshoes to nails, tools to weapons, everything passed through his forge. He was part technician, part magician, and everyone relied on his skills. You pump the bellows and watch the coals glow orange red. The heat is instant, invasive. Your eyebrows tingle. The smith places a rod into the flame, waits for it to turn yellow, then pulls it out and begins hammering.
Clang, clang, clang.
Every strike echoes in your bones. Sparks fly. The rhythm is hypnotic. The smell, burned metal, sweat, smoke, will haunt your clothes forever. But watching him shape iron like it's clay is almost beautiful. Then it's your turn. He hands you a smaller piece and says, "Try to flatten it." You swing. Mississippi swing again. Tap the edge. He groans. Eventually, with a lot of squinting and luck, you make a vaguely flat shape. He calls it art. You're not sure if he's impressed or just tired of watching. Fringe tidbit. Medieval smiths often whispered protective charms over their work, especially swords and horseshoes. Some even carved symbols into metal to ward off misfortune or grumpy clients. A boy arrives with a snapped plow blade. The smith inspects it, mutters about cheap iron, and sets to work. You offer to help. He eyes you skeptically, then lets you hold the tongs. Holding molten metal? Not your proudest decision, but you do it.
Carefully.
The blade is repaired with a few strong blows and plunged into a barrel of water, hissing like a dragon mid-tantrum. You're soaked in sweat by the time you leave the forge. Your ears are ringing. Your face is shiny. You smell like an iron sandwich. You head next to the cobbler's hut. Less heat, more leather. The cobbler is a wiry woman with nimble fingers and a look that says she's seen things. She hands you a boot sole and a wooden peg.
Sit.
So, you jab your thumb.
Twice.
She doesn't blink. You eventually manage to stitch a passable sole. She nods. You be fired in a city guild. But not the worst I've seen. Historians still argue whether medieval craft guilds improved quality of life or stifled innovation through strict rules and exclusivity. In the village, you're far from any guild, but standards still exist and pride matters. You ask if she enjoys her work.
Some days, she says.
At least I'm dry. Then she winks, and I don't have to shovel manure. Fair enough. Next, you're summoned to the mill. It's located by the stream, its wooden wool turning with a rhythmic squeak-splash-squeak. Inside, grain dust hangs like fog. You sneeze 6 times before someone hands you a damp cloth to tie around your mouth. Your job? Pour barley into the hopper. The stone millstones grind with a deep, ancient sound. Grain goes in, flour comes out. Seems simple until you try lifting a full sack. Your spine files a formal complaint. Mainstream fact. Medieval mills were symbols of economic power. Lords often controlled them and charged villagers a fee, in grain, for milling. Using a personal hand mill was sometimes banned to ensure dependency and revenue. You ask the miller if anyone ever tries to cheat. He chuckles. All the time. They bring lighter sacks, hope I don't weigh them. He taps the balance scale with affection. But I always know. You leave the mill dustier, wheezier, but a little wiser. Your final visit of the day is to the weaver, a quiet, middle-aged man who works alone in a corner hut filled with thread, yarn, and the constant clatter of his loom. The colors are subtle: browns, grays, muted greens. The fabrics, though rough by modern standards, are essential. He teaches you how to spin wool. It's harder than it looks. Your thread keeps breaking. He shows you again, patient and soft-spoken. Eventually, you manage a wobbly, frizzy line. He smiles. You'll get there. Wool has a mind of its own. Fringe tidbit. Some weavers incorporated human hair into threads as charms or mementos, especially from lovers or departed relatives. Spinning was often a social, symbolic act, deeply tied to stories and fate. As dusk approaches, the village square grows lively. Children chase chickens. A traveling peddler opens his sack of wares: needles, spices, ribbons, mirrors. People gather, bartering with grain or eggs. You trade your lopsided leather pouch, crafted during your cobbler moment, for a single cinnamon stick. It's a miracle. You sniff it like treasure. Then the church bell rings. Time for vespers. You join the candlelit procession to the chapel. The priest chants in Latin. You stand, kneel, stand again, unsure when to move. No one minds. The ritual soothes the village into stillness. As you exit, someone hands you a hunk of sweet bread, your cinnamon stick already paying off. You nibble it slowly, amazed at how something so simple can taste so rich. Back in bed, you listen to the sounds of the craftspeople winding down. The last clink of hammer on metal, a loom slowing to silence, the soft whir of a spindle. And your aching body? It's somehow proud, like you've contributed, even if only a little. You're no master, but you're part of the rhythm now. You drift off smelling of smoke, flour, leather, and wool, a medieval cologne no one asked for. The cock crows again. You wish it wouldn't, but like clockwork, you're up, stretching sore limbs and trying to shake off dreams of anvils chasing you through clouds of grain dust. No rest for the modern soul stuck in a medieval routine. Today, you're headed to a place few dream of visiting, the medieval courthouse. You trudge across the village, guided by the tolling of the church bell. Not for mass this time, for justice. And in medieval times, justice is anything but blind or balanced. You arrive at the manor house, where the local lord holds court. It's a weekly ritual. A long bench sits at one end of the hall, flanked by village elders, scribes, and the lord himself perched high, surveying the crowd with a bored expression and a fur-lined robe that screams, "My decisions are final." Mainstream fact: in medieval villages, local justice was often carried out by the landowner or his appointed bailiff. It was a system based more on tradition and power than codified law, with trials often lacking formal evidence or legal counsel. You sit in the corner, trying to stay invisible. A sheep theft case begins. The accused, a skinny man with a nervous twitch, claims the sheep wandered onto his land. The owner, red-faced and loud, insists it was lured with grain. The court listens. A few witnesses speak. Then, with minimal deliberation, the lord declares the accused guilty. Punishment? A fine in chickens, or 3 days in the stocks. You glance at the wooden stocks near the entrance, already occupied by a boy who allegedly insulted the priest's donkey. He sneezes from hay allergies. You feel for him. Fringe tidbit: some villages use trial by ordeal, an archaic method where suspects had to carry hot iron or plunge their hand into boiling water. If their wounds healed cleanly, they were deemed innocent. This was often seen as God's judgment. You don't ask about that here. Just in case. The next case is darker. A woman accused of witchcraft. She's frail, older, with hair like silver thread. The villagers whisper as she's brought forward. The charge? Cursing a neighbor's cow, which stopped giving milk. No evidence, of course. Just fear and a bad harvest. The Lord sighs, clearly tired of these claims. He leans forward and says, "Do you renounce the devil and swear no pact has been made?" She nods frantically. He waves her off. "Let it go. The cow is old." Relieved murmurs. But tension lingers. You realize how thin the line is between superstition and sentence. Historians still argue whether medieval witchcraft accusations were based more on social tension, misogyny, or actual spiritual paranoia. Likely, a swirling mix of all three. After court, you wander into the village tavern. Not for a pint, but to witness the social courtroom of public opinion. The place is warm, sticky with spilled ale, and humming with debate. Villagers retell each case like it's a soap opera. "He definitely took that sheep," one says. "His fence is too high for a wander." "Old Marta cursed my laundry last week," another mutters. "Rain ever since." You sip thin ale to blend in. It's bitter, barely fizzy. Definitely not your IPA. Then you're off to a punishment site. Not a cheery stop, but important. The pillory sits in the center of the square. A young man, arms and head locked in place, receives mockery from passing children. He stole a loaf of bread. You wince. Yesterday, you nearly fainted from hunger. You might have done the same. You learn the punishment scale is elastic. Petty theft equals stocks. Repeat offense equals flogging. More serious crimes? Mutilation, banishment, or death. But execution is rare here. It costs labor, and villagers are more useful alive. Your guide, a local reeve, stern but kind, explains that public shame often works better than jail. "People remember humiliation," he says. "And we don't have room for prisons." You nod, though a seatbelt and a fair trial suddenly sound lovely. Next stop, the Gallows Hill. No one's been hanged here in months, but it stands as a warning. A lone wooden frame with a rope swaying gently in the breeze. Birds perch on it like it's just another branch. You shiver. But enough doom. The day isn't all discipline. You visit the scribe's hut next, a sanctuary of ink and scrolls. It smells like old parchment and candle wax. The scribe, a monkish man with gentle hands, teaches you to mix ink from oak gall and iron salts. You write your name with a quill. It looks like a goose sneezed. Mainstream fact: very few people could read or write in the Middle Ages. Scribes held rare literacy, and their work was critical for contracts, court records, and correspondence. You copy a court record. In the year of our Lord 1284, John of Renham was fined 4 hens for striking the Lord's dog. Real case. Real consequences. He lets you read a short poem about justice. It's rough, rhymed awkwardly, but the message is clear. Mercy matters more than punishment. You glance back toward the square. The boy in the stocks is gone. Freed, perhaps. Or dragged off for a lecture. Either way, the village breathes again. Later, you witness a conflict being settled without court. 2 farmers argue over shared land. Voices rise. Then an elder steps in, an old woman with a crooked cane and sharp tongue. She listens, nods, then proposes they rotate use by moon phases. Both men grumble, then nod. Justice, it seems, comes in many forms: law, custom, old wisdom, and luck. You end the day watching the sun dip behind the manor. The bell tolls again. Somewhere, the Lord writes down fines and favors. You wonder how many were truly fair. And you wonder, if you stayed here longer, how long you'd last before landing in those itchy stocks for talking back, wandering too far, or asking about cinnamon prices again. Probably not long. You wake to the clang of metal. Not a bell this time, but a hammer striking hot iron. The forge is alive, pulsing like the heart of the village. And today, that's where you're heading, to the world of craftsmen, merchants, and guild secrets. Smoke curls into the morning air as you step into the blacksmith's domain. It's like stepping into a furnace. Sparks fly as the smith hammers a horseshoe on his anvil. Sweat pours off him, but he grins. This is the rhythm of his life. Strike, turn, quench, repeat. He hands you a pair of tongs. You almost drop them. They're heavier than your dumbbells back home. He gestures toward the forge, inviting you to try. You jab the iron clumsily into the coals. The fire hisses. You feel absurdly proud, like you're forging a sword for a knight, until he corrects you. It's a plow blade. No glory, but everyone eats. Mainstream fact: blacksmiths were central to medieval life. They weren't just making weapons. They made nails, tools, hinges, horseshoes, essentially the backbone of village infrastructure. You leave with singed eyebrows and greater respect for iron. Across the square is the carpenter's hut. It smells like sawdust and beeswax. Inside, a young apprentice shapes a wheel spoke with quiet focus. The master carpenter barely looks up as he carves decorative trim for a door. You run your fingers along a finished beam, smooth, strong, perfectly square. No power tools, just years of practice and a lot of elbow grease. The carpenter chuckles when you ask how he measures angles. He pulls out a string with knots and a tiny bronze triangle. Pythagoras, he says, even if we don't know his name. Historians still argue whether craftsmen truly understood classical geometry or just mimicked what worked. Either way, you're amazed by the precision. You peek into the weaver's cottage next. The loom dominates the room, a wooden skeleton stretched with yarn. The weaver, a woman with strong forearms, invites you to try. You tangle the shuttle on the first pass. She laughs kindly. You'd starve in Flanders.
She's right.
Fringe tidbit: some guilds believed weaving was a divine act. Certain patterns were thought to protect against illness or bring prosperity. Superstition, yes, but also a reflection of how seriously they took their craft. Outside, the merchant stalls are setting up. The market is small but lively. A man sells salt from a cart pulled by donkeys. A woman hawks dried herbs and homemade candles. The smells are glorious: thyme, lavender, old cheese, and boiled leather. You eavesdrop on a barter negotiation. A farmer offers a basket of eggs for a length of wool cloth. The merchant counters with a pair of worn shoes thrown in. They haggle. They compromise. They shake hands. Money exists here, silver pennies mostly, but barter is still the daily language. Your credit card would be less useful than a good chicken. You try trading the sack of dried apples you were gifted earlier. In exchange, you get a clay mug and a warning. Don't eat them all at once, city belly. Across the square, you notice a cluster of men in matching cloaks. Guild members. They speak low, glancing at the market. You follow at a distance as they duck into the guild hall, a timbered building marked with a carved hammer and quill. Inside, it's quieter than church. Candles flicker. A scroll lists names, fines, and oaths. The master guildsman eyes you skeptically. You explain you're just observing. He shrugs and offers bread. Guild hospitality, apparently. Mainstream fact: medieval guilds regulated quality, prices, training, and even moral behavior. Membership was required to legally practice a trade in many towns. They were early forms of unions, plus a touch of secret society. He shows you the apprentice's oath, a promise to serve loyally, avoid deceit, and uphold the guild's honor. It's inked in Latin, with space for a shaky signature. You imagine a 12-year-old signing it, trembling, ready to give a decade of his life for a shot at mastery. Then comes the masterpiece test, a real term. To join the guild fully, you had to create a perfect example of your craft. No pressure. The guildsman gestures toward a display shelf, a tiny chair, a flawless chain, a carved box with a hidden lock. Each is a legacy, the result of years of labor and pride. You try to lift the chain. It's heavier than it looks, and probably worth more than your medieval life. Outside, a boy runs past yelling, the tanner's boiling hides. You follow your nose. The tannery is, well, horrifying. The stench hits like a wall. Animal skins hang from racks, dripping. A huge vat bubbles ominously. The tanner, half soaked in brine and sweat, cheerfully explains he uses dog urine and lime to soften hides. You gag. He laughs. Better than dying of cold. Fringe tidbit: some medieval tanners collected dog poop from the streets to help in the leather softening process. It's gross, yes, but it worked. You make a mental note never to romanticize leather boots again. You stumble toward the candlemaker's nook to recover. It smells like beeswax and smoke. Peaceful, finally. The candlemaker dips wicks patiently, over and over, explaining the difference between beeswax, sweet, expensive, and tallow, cheap, rancid. He offers you a tallow candle. It smells like regret. But in a world without electricity, even a stinky flame is precious. By mid-afternoon, the market square is buzzing. Minstrels play a lute melody. A juggler tosses apples with flair. A tooth puller sets up shop with a hammer and questionable hygiene. You give him a wide berth. You overhear talk of a traveling merchant arriving soon. From Genoa, maybe. He carries cinnamon, silk, maybe even sugar. Everyone's excited. You join a small circle listening to an old craftsman telling tales of a guild trip to Bruges. They drink ale like water, he says. And their looms never stop. You smile, realizing that for all the grime, hardship, and dog urine tanning, this world has rhythm. And pride. And a strange sort of beauty. But you're exhausted. Your hands are calloused, your clothes smell like boiled hoof, and your dignity is still recovering from the loom incident. As you make your way back through the square, the blacksmith waves. The weaver nods. The tanner winks, you're not sure why. You feel part of something. Not a knight, not a lord, but a maker. A cog in a world that's held together not by kings, but by hammers, looms, and wax-dipped patience. And for a moment, that feels like enough. You wake to a different kind of noise, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the shouted calls of merchants, and the sharp clang of iron against wood. Today, you're walking the streets of a medieval city, and it's nothing like the quiet village you've left behind. The narrow lanes are jam-packed with people, shopkeepers, beggars, priests, and children weaving between carts piled high with goods. The smell hits you first, a pungent stew of manure, smoke, fish, and something you can't quite place, probably last week's garbage. Charming. You trudge past a public latrine, a long wooden bench with holes, perched over the river. Nearby, a line of women scrubs laundry in a stone basin, gossiping loudly. The water is murky, but it's the best you've got. Mainstream fact. Medieval cities often had rudimentary sewage systems, but most waste, human and animal, was dumped directly into rivers or streets, making sanitation a constant battle. As you walk, a man hawks a strange remedy. Snake oil. Cure your gout and give you strength. You resist the urge to ask if it's really made from snakes. You duck into a guild hall festooned with banners. Inside, men in velvet hats discuss trade rights. Guilds control who can sell what, setting prices and quality rules. They're powerful and a bit like medieval trade unions, only with more velvet. Outside, street performers juggle and sing, and children chase each other with wooden swords. You almost feel the magic of the city, the chaos, the possibility. But then, a sudden shout. You turn to see a man dragging a woman by the hair. A crowd forms. She's accused of stealing bread. You remember the stalks from the village, the humiliation. Here, she might face something worse. Historians still argue whether urban courts were more merciful or brutal than rural ones. The truth? It depended on the judge, and sometimes on how many coins you could bribe. You slip away and enter a tavern. The walls are thick with smoke and the air tastes like burnt toast. Patrons drink ale, swap rumors, and play dice. A grizzled man beckons you over. Care for a story of the plague? You nod. It's the early 14th century, he says. The Black Death is coming. You shiver. Fringe tidbit. Some believe the plague was punishment from God, others blamed bad air, or even comet tails. Medieval doctors wore bird-like masks stuffed with herbs to ward off the miasma. It looks ridiculous, but they were trying their best. You down your ale quickly, eyes on the door. Moving on, you visit a market stall selling spices, pepper, cinnamon, cloves. Priceless treasures brought from the East by daring merchants. You sniff the cinnamon and imagine the warm pies of the future. The spice merchant smiles. They say cinnamon was once worth more than gold. You nod, recalling how nobles loved to flaunt such luxuries. You pass by the cathedral, a towering monument of stone and stained glass. Inside, the smell of incense and candle wax is thick. Priests chant Gregorian hymns, their voices rising and falling like waves. The air hums with devotion and a hint of fear. After all, the church watches everything. Mainstream fact: medieval cathedrals were not just places of worship, but centers of education, charity, and sometimes political power. You notice a pilgrim kneeling near a relic, a fragment of a saint's bone. Pilgrimage was a big deal, and relics brought visitors and money. You wonder if any of it really worked. Outside, you stumble upon a public execution. The crowd is dense, silent except for the occasional gasp. The condemned, a thief, stands on the scaffold. The executioner raises his axe. You close your eyes. No need to see. Walking away, you pass a woman selling herbs and charms. She catches your eye and presses a small pouch into your hand. "For protection," she whispers. You thank her, suddenly grateful for superstition. You find a quiet spot by the river to sit. The city buzzes around you. Life and death, hope and fear tangled together. You realize that surviving here isn't just about strength or smarts. It's about luck, timing, and knowing when to keep your mouth shut. You might not last a day, but maybe, just maybe, you'd last the night. The sun begins to set, casting a golden haze over the worn cobblestones and timbered rooftops. You find yourself wandering toward the castle walls, those looming fortifications that dominate every medieval town worth its salt. You think, maybe here you'll find a bit of order amid the chaos, but you're about to learn that power has its own messiness. The guards eye you with suspicion as you approach the gatehouse. Their armor clinks softly, but their hands never stray far from their swords. You're reminded that these men live with violence as their job, and diplomacy is often a distant second. Inside, the castle courtyard is alive with activity. Servants rush about with buckets and brooms. Nobles stroll with a lazy confidence that borders on arrogance, and a knight practices with a lance, his armor gleaming even in the fading light. Mainstream fact: castles were both military strongholds and noble residences, centers of administration and justice, symbols of power visible for miles. You are struck by the sheer size of the kitchens. Massive cauldrons bubble over roaring fires. The smell of roasting meat mingles with herbs and spilled ale. You watch cooks preparing food for dozens, chopping vegetables and boiling grains in earthenware pots. A kitchen hand hands you a crust of bread soaked in meat broth. You take it, grateful for the warm, if somewhat soggy, sustenance. You notice a herald making announcements, his voice booming across the courtyard. News of war, a tax increase, a lost shipment of salt. Everything feels urgent and fragile all at once. You try to imagine the day-to-day politics of the castle. The alliances, the betrayals, the whispered intrigues that historians still debate to this day. Was the Lord truly in control, or just a figurehead for feuding barons? You wander into the chapel, a quiet, dim space with flickering candles and holy relics. You hear monks chanting softly, their voices weaving a thread of calm through the castle's turmoil. Fringe tidbit: some medieval monks practiced sleeping in shifts, so there was always someone awake in the chapel praying, believed to keep the castle safe from harm. Your calm is shattered by the sudden blast of a horn. A rider bursts through the gate, his horse steaming, bearing urgent news. The Lord gathers his council quickly. There's talk of rebellion, rumors of siege. You realize the castle, for all its grandeur, is a precarious place, a bubble of relative safety surrounded by danger. As night falls, you're led to a small chamber. The bed is a rough heap of straw and wool. No feather mattress here. You lay down, muscles aching, mind racing. You think back to the day, the blacksmith's hammer, the market's chaos, the stink of the tannery, the cold stone of the cathedral, the dread of the execution scaffold. You see the faces of people who built this world, gritty, resilient, flawed. And you understand why you wouldn't last a day here. Not because you lack courage or brains, but because this world demanded more than survival. It demanded endurance, grit, and a willingness to accept discomfort as the norm. You close your eyes, the sounds of the castle fading into a distant hum. The fire flickers low. Outside, the wind whispers through arrow slits. And as sleep overtakes you, you carry with you the strange beauty of a time long past, a world where every breath was a small victory, every dawn a hard-earned gift. Now, as the story settles like dust after a long day, you might find your eyelids growing heavy, the mind slowing its relentless pace. Imagine the flickering candlelight casting gentle shadows on the stone walls, the quiet hum of night creatures beyond the castle moat, and the faint rustle of straw as you shift in your modest bed. This journey through the grit and grime, the laughter and sorrow of medieval life wasn't just about imagining hardship. It's about stepping into the shoes of those who shaped history, enduring trials with quiet strength. And though you wouldn't last a day in those times, you've glimpsed a world where every moment was a dance between fear and hope, survival and humanity. So, breathe deeply now. Feel the cool night air against your skin. Let the past fade softly, like the last notes of a distant lute. Tomorrow is another day in another world. Sleep well, knowing you've traveled far.